Are we ready? 1, 2, 3. Ballrooms at the White House. All right, 1, 2, 3. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Chalkboard History, Volume 2, Episode 10, 12, 15.
Yeah, sure.
Jeff hasn't been on the program for a while. We're going to talk about our newest specialty tour, All Men Are Created Equal, which has quickly become one of the most popular specialty tours. And we've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 different staff members that are taking that tour, but you've been one of those people, and you've taken a whole slew of folks through Carnton and Carter House, or just Carnton.
So far it's only worked out where I've given them at Carnton.
Okay. Well, so let's talk about what you... So we had this, premise of what we wanted to convey on the tour, but you've told me you've had some interesting dialogue. So let's tell everybody about what the feedback has been during the tours.
It's actually been very good feedback, and the thing that, as far as my experience giving the tour, it's been a mixture of local people coming because it's something new at the sites that they've known about, but also families bringing their kids. And that was a little bit of a gear shift for me, because the whole concept of the tour is All Men Are Created Equal, and you're diving into some of the politics, but also some of the human experiences. And then I had to shift gears, be like, oh, how do I convey this to a younger generation? So that was a bit of a learning curve for myself.
Did you hear from any of the parents why they brought their kids?
Most of it was just because the kids are interested in history. Mm-hmm. I had a mom bring her son, and the son, she told me, she goes, he is obsessed with the Constitution, and he wants to be a Supreme Court justice. And this kid's like 12 or 13 years old. And so, and kids will say that's what they want to be to grow up. But when we started getting to the tour, he's like knowing stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of cool to have someone that was a younger generation coming to take the tour that was specifically wanting to kind of dive into some of those topics. Mm-hmm. And so that one was a little bit easier for me because he kind of already knew some of the context surrounding some of the, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, but kind of filling in some of those gaps for him between that time and what's leading up to the American Civil War.
What have you learned in giving the tour that maybe you didn't know about the subject matter?
Just how much more informed the American Civil War was by the American Revolution. Really connecting that 80 years. And that was something I think a lot of the public needs to understand is like the American Civil War was not in a vacuum. It was not in that 4 years. And oftentimes a lot of us that are Civil War nerds, we just look at it in that 4 years. Mm-hmm. And I think once you start expanding the context of that 80 years prior, a lot of stuff starts to make a lot more sense.
Okay, this is an interesting point because we are as removed from World War II as the Civil War generation was from the American Revolution. And I can see from my age group, only one generation younger, how differently they view what I consider to be pretty salient facts about the Second World War, but also about the Cold War in Russia, which actually kind of boggles my mind, like the sort of ambivalence that some people have about Russia. And Russia to this day makes me crazy because I remember when Russia was the Soviet Union, and I'm seeing how the generation actually that was born after 1840, especially who tilted toward the Confederacy, don't have the same feelings about the founding or about the Declaration of Independence. And I was like, wow, history does really repeat itself in just different forms. So has that thought hit you at all about
Oh, certainly an aspect of that. Because, and I'll use that on tour, is like we are 80 years removed from World War II, and how do we reflect on that time? there's going to be differences, but there's some of that human nature kind of thought process that the people back then would have been experiencing as well.
Right. Like, I think one of the things that this isn't even now about the tour, but like when I hear the term Nazi and fascist tossed around just willy-nilly, and I'm like, do you even know what like a real Nazi or a real fascist is? And then I think, well, look at the term equality. Stephen Douglas is debating with him, and he's saying, well, it only means white Europeans. And Lincoln's like, you don't even have to be a lawyer, I think, to be looking at Douglas and saying, it's insane that you actually think that, but how did you get to that point?
Right. Well, and that's a very good point, because that was something I took personally that I wanted to convey on my tours, is to people. I wanted people to feel what that phrase meant to them, that concept of all men are created equal. How am I going to, within 90 minutes, get them to hear that phrase and have the same kind of mind-boggling expression that concept is something that is powerful.
Yeah.
And at Carnton, there's so many opportunities to kind of create those experiences for them to hear that phrase and be like, oh, that means something very powerful. One of the best tools is the book that was given to Nelson McGavick by Dr. Ewing. Nelson McGavick was enslaved by the Grundy family, then given to Jacob McGavick, and a book was given to Nelson, who was enslaved, which could allude to the fact that he knew how to read or write.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people, what if he was not given that book? What if he was given a copy of the Declaration of Independence and read those words, we hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator, and bill of rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? How life-changing is that word to him? Mm-hmm. That concept that would be put forth by a piece of paper. And I think it really gives me an opportunity to talk about education after emancipation for those who were formerly enslaved. There's people who are sacrificing their lives just to learn how to read or write.
Have you had any interesting dialogue about Thomas Jefferson yet?
I mean, I think most of the dialogue stuff a lot of historic sites around him tend to have to deal with is like the contradictions that with him putting forth these concepts but also owning enslaved people. And I think it's, for us as interpreters, it's okay to be like, it's okay that those contradictions exist.
I had someone ask me, I was showing around some travel writers recently, and this topic came up because one of them saw that we were offering this tour, and she asked me point blank, she said, do you think John McGavick believed it? And I said, you mean equality? And she said, yeah. And I said, I don't know. But John McGavick was an educated person. And I don't know what he believed, but I think it inevitably creates a certain amount of conflict. Because somewhere in here, like Lincoln said, the words are pretty clear. They're self-evident. All men are created equal. So how do you spin that? And that we were standing in the farm office, and I said, oh, and here's the book, An Essay on Liberty and Slavery. And I've always thought you have to buy a book like that to convince yourself that it has to be something else. It can't be just that. And I mention this because I think the Declaration, I think that's why the 250th is going to be really interesting to see what the national mood is or how people celebrate it or commemorate it. Because I think the Declaration is actually being debated in a way that is somewhere between interesting and unhealthy. There are so many people in this country right now, in the 21st century, after 250 years of this experiment, lots of setbacks, but also much progress, still openly questioning whether it means what it says.
Right. It still means something. I think the tour helps people understand.
It still means something.
Right. I think it helps make people understand how relevant it is still to us today. Those concepts that were put forth by the founding. And when you brought up the farm office, to me, on tours, that has become one of the most powerful places.
It absolutely has.
Because I really convey to people that the type of conversations that are happening in government buildings and state houses are happening in those types of spaces as well. And because I'll bring up this, we could get on a whole other episode about this, Ford versus Ford, It was a Tennessee Supreme Court. Slave owner freed his slaves, wanted to give them land. The son was not happy about it, sued the will. It goes all the way to Tennessee Supreme Court. Judge Nathan Green basically rules, and this is paraphrasing, the condition of a slave is not that of an ox or a cow. It's of a human who is enslaved. Of a human. That acknowledges the humanity of enslaved people in Tennessee. You don't think that they're not having discussions about that in that farm office? Absolutely.
Sure they are.
This happens, it's ruled in 1846. John McGavick's alive.
Mm-hmm.
So is Nelson McGavick.
Yeah.
If Nelson knew how to read and he got a hold of a newspaper and it says, wait, they just ruled this in Tennessee Supreme, I have humanity.
And 11 years later, the Supreme Court of the United States doesn't even get into the humanity. They simply say that black people cannot be citizens, and they have no right of redress in the courts. I mean, that's an incredible 10-year stretch of time.
Oh, yeah.
Which, of course, elevates him to, begin forcing people to think about, well, we started by saying all men are created equal. And now we say all men are created equal except this class. And if we continue, it'll be this class is excluded and that class is excluded. And that's a little bit of what I'm seeing today, where if you don't believe in equality, if the words don't really mean anything, then you can just make up like arbitrary rules. And that's a sort of dangerous tribal mentality. But I've been really pleased with how many people have been taking the tour. And also, I've noticed how many kids.
A lot of families. I was not expecting that. I thought it was going to be, not necessarily families coming and stuff. So that was, like I said, was a learning curve for me because I had to okay, how do I explain this to younger kids? Mm-hmm. And what was really helpful is kind of looking for kids' books that talk about like the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. So help boil it down, distill it down to a younger generation and just propose those questions. Right. What would it be like to, go into school and learn how to read?
Here's something that came up the other day at that group that, that I showed around here and then you showed around in Franklin. One of the people, we were talking, of course, about the Declaration and about Civil War and about, who meant what and how did they feel about this or that. And I brought up Lincoln, and the comment was made, well, Lincoln was certainly, so then it turned into gender. And this person said, well, there's no way he was ever thinking about women. And I said, I think you're probably right, because I think most men, period, white or black, weren't thinking about gender. I said, but there is a moment when Lincoln actually does reference that. And I don't know which speech it was. I want to say maybe it was one in Kalamazoo when he was running around making speeches for Fremont in 56. But he does reference the Declaration at one point and includes gender, which is fascinating that he is thinking about it, because he says that we are not all equal in every respect. And he said we're different heights, we're different weights, we have different intellectual capacities, there are different sexes. And he actually uses that term. So I think Lincoln actually was, he's not running out saying women should vote, right? Don't get me wrong. But Lincoln is recognizing that equality applies to everyone, all human beings, all people. And then I mentioned that, as you've probably heard me say this, that I think Lincoln is like a founder born about 40 years later.
Absolutely.
Because it's one thing to be an abolitionist. He's still taking that nuanced approach simply about equality, natural born equality. And I know in my conversations, that really kind of strikes at the heart of this. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think this tour is going to be incredibly popular as we get into the spring and then leading up to the 4th of July. So any other fun stories or thoughts about it, or where do you think this goes? And
well, when we were talking about the farm office, something that it rung a bell for me, and it was a feedback from a visitor when I was talking about like people like John McGavick and who he's socializing with are in this farm office having these discussions about politics and these types of things. And she goes, would the enslaved domestic staff been in this room too? And I was like, yes. They might be waiting for someone needs something, or might be standing in the corner of the room.
And they can hear.
They can hear. And so they hear this conversation. They're hearing these concepts, but they're not a part of the conversation.
Right.
And for me, that was like, oh, wow. And I love connecting that history to those physical spaces.
I do too, because the farm office and the dining room at Carnton are, connected to one another, but the family room and the dining room at Ripavilla are pretty close, and that's where people, they talk then, they still talk now.
Yeah.
And the subject matter is different. You don't think people today are talking about immigration or ICE or, whatever the subject is. Abortion. I mean, certainly they're talking about it. And there's a lot of different opinions. I love that point, though, about the domestic slaves, because as I was doing research for this new book, I saw countless articles in 1860, and they were mostly Tennessee newspapers because that's what I was focusing on. They were encouraging, the writers and the editorial staff were encouraging all slave owners to not take their slaves to political rallies.
Oh.
Because they didn't want them to hear what was being discussed. Because what's being discussed in 1860? It's almost all about race and slavery, particularly white supremacy, black inferiority, and of course that's the secession movement. They don't want them hearing that this guy is taking the position of equality. That tells you right there that the conversations. It's too bad we don't have video, right, or audio, yeah. Because imagine what was actually being talked about. But just like our own homes today.
Yeah.
And it was I think the last thing I might say is it was real. Like, those are real feelings. It's easy to diminish it and say, oh, they're horrible people. Yeah, okay. But those were real conversations that were going on.
Yeah. In both in an aspect of on the tour, I'll also dive into the aspect of the female sphere of the 19th century, especially in the parlor rooms, because you don't think they're not socializing and talk about aspects of that. The question of equality, especially for when it comes to the aspect of slavery, the threat of that being taken away, well, that could take away any independent wealth that a wealthy white woman might have in the South.
Can you imagine? We gotta cut this short, but could you imagine? So you and I sit down. We live in Spring Hill, and we have differing views about secession. We're both slave owners. And we're having a conversation, and one of the, let's say my driver is in the room and hears it. He hears us disagreeing. You don't think that driver, the next time he's at your place or encounters an enslaved person at your place, and then they start talking? Because then they're like, well, I just heard the two of them talking and they disagree. That sort of stuff is fascinating because it shows the South was actually almost the Old South, what becomes the Confederacy, was almost doomed to fail because there were cracks and fissures everywhere. There was so much disagreement, and there were so many people hearing the disagreement. And when the collapse begins, it's why I've always loved the book, The Fall of the House of Dixie. When you think about how the institutional nature had existed for over 2 centuries and it collapses in like 18 months, it's incredible. And I think guests love to think about those kinds of things. And you're really good at bringing them into those places and making them think. Okay, so last thoughts for real. Anything else?
I think this tour is a great opportunity to, and you can learn about this too. And it's an opportunity to have those discussions. And that's more how my tour is I like to encourage that discussion. And to really understand how informed the American Civil War was by the American Revolution. What happens in between that time? I think that's something that's been really resonating with people, and they will start to think about it a lot more in the next coming years.
Yeah. They're actually debating what the Declaration of Independence meant in 1861, just like we're still doing in 2025 and 2026. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.